For more than 20 years, the musical Wicked has been a Broadway favorite, and now the story, a little bit of a Wizard of Oz prequel, is making the shift from the stage to the screen. Since 2003, actresses all over the country, all over the world, have played the gravity-defying Elphaba, and now the latest powerhouse singer to don green face paint and belt that signature high note is Cynthia Erivo, who just happens to be here in the studio. Welcome.
Hi.
I mean, to me, from the first few seconds of the film, I was just so blown away by the visual and the world of Oz and the way that it portrays it. And I'm just wondering what it felt like to step onto that set
Yeah.
in the full costume and makeup and just inhabit that world for the first time.
Really, really overwhelming. I think the wonderful thing about the, doing it the way we have is that everything is really practical. So Nathan Crowley and his wonderful set designing team created the world of Oz. So when we were on the set, we were on the set. Very little green screen, very little blue screen. Everything is, you can touch it, you can feel it. So it felt like you could sort of disappear into the world, and then add to that Elphaba, her green skin, which was practical. All of the details that we added for it meant that could really sort of like sail away into it and be immersed. And I loved the feeling. It was very overwhelming. That very first day was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that all that practicality? Was that an effort to kind of make it feel like the stage, or because this is a fantasy world and you wanted to feel like you were in it?
I think it was a combination of things. John Chu, our director, has a massive, huge imagination, and I think he wanted to allow us the space to really play. And when you can see what's around you and you can touch the things around you, the capacity for play and imagination actually really expands. And also the ability to be really intimate also becomes really, really possible, because you can see and you can feel and you can smell and you can hear everything around you. And I think, yes, it pays homage to the stage show as well, because the things are practical, but it also allows us to build the world. So it does both things in opposition, allows for intimacy and for expansion too, I think. Yeah.
It's always interesting to me to see how a signature song
Yeah.
or a signature scene changes from the stage to the screen, and how something takes on an unusual quality you wouldn't have thought for before. Can you tell us about how you approach this role? You obviously have a deep theatrical background. This was originally a theatrical role. How much did you intentionally think, I want to play this differently? It's a movie compared to a musical.
I think I always try to approach any character, and particularly this one, as truthfully as you possibly can. So as wherever the ground is what I'm looking for. I want to find the earthy qualities of it, so it feels really connected, and just by osmosis that happens. It ends up being a little bit different, because my alphabet is going to be different to someone else's alphabet, just because of the difference in person and different in experience and who we are. And I think that's what happened. I wasn't trying to veer away from what has been before. In fact, I love what was there before. And for me, she's the architect, and I've been listening to her for years and hearing her voice come through the speakers and my headphones, singing those songs. But my voice is not her voice, and her voice is not my voice, and so I can do what makes sense for me, so it feels connected and true. That's really what happens.
You said something interesting in another interview. You said, I had no intention of playing to the green. Can you tell me a little more about what you were thinking, what that
Playing
meant?
to what I didn't want to do is play up being green. I think for this character, she's been in it for her whole entire life. She knows it's there, and I don't necessarily think uh, it needed to be. That's not
Sure.
what she was in the room looking green, but it's not the thing that she leads with. It's an everyday thing for her. So I guess for me, the natural thing to do was to exist in it, as opposed to showcase it, because it's there anyway. You can't miss it. So I don't have to do anything for you to see it. You know.
Going into this, I'm curious, how much did, whether Wicked, the musical, or The Wizard of Oz, how big did those two loom in your mind growing up? I mean, you're a lifelong theater person,
Yeah.
musical person, so I imagine, but
Yeah. So I came. Obviously, The Wizard of Oz for me was first. It was a lot of my childhood, we used to watch it as a family, and in London, you have those you used to have like Saturday films or weekend films, and they would come on. I think it was like Channel 4, and that was one of the films that was repeated, and I would always watch it, so I knew it very well. And Somewhere Over the Rainbow, you know that song like the back of your hand, and I'm a fan of Judy Garland, so I knew her voice, and I knew that song because of her voice. Um, and the film. And then when I was at drama school, I think I was about 20 years old, um, that's when I heard about Wicked, but not because I had seen the show, but because I started learning the music.
Hmm.
A friend of mine would steal away with me to a piano room, and we would sit at the piano and we would learn the libretto, and we would just play the music. So by the time I'd left drama school, about 23 years old, I knew the music like the back of my hand, and I'd never seen the show. So by the time I was 25, when I could afford a ticket to go to the West End, I bought myself a solo ticket. I took myself on a date. It was my birthday to see Wicked, and it just stuck with me. You know, the music, these characters, and Elphaba particularly. I think there's something about a story about a person who feels like they're on the outside, who's treated like they're different, that just sort of clung to me. I got it immediately. Yeah.
What do you think you would have thought in that moment if somebody said, "And down the line, you'll be starring in the musical, in the movie version of this, going all over the world talking about it"?
I would I would probably have said, "I'll believe it when I see it." You know, I barely believed that I was gonna go to Broadway with, The Color Purple, so I to if someone would have said that to me, I just don't know. I don't know if I would have believed them, to be honest. It was a nice thought to have had, to dream about, but the actuality of it happening, for me, felt like it was very far away, yeah.
Given all of that, given how much you knew, the music, what of the many different iconic songs that you get to perform in this film, which was your favorite? Which felt the most surreal in that moment?
Oh, the most surreal. Um I think if we're talking about the most surreal, it probably was "Defying Gravity," because it's the song,
Yeah.
you know, that everyone knows when it comes to this piece, and I think that's when it already sort of. And I had been by the time I got to it, I had been shooting for over a year, and we had had a stop in between and then come back. So it's the last thing I had done. That was the most surreal moment, truly. I think also because of what it was and the circumstances in which I was getting to sing it, you know, after having done the entire movie and ending at this point with this song felt like, "Whew, okay, this is this is the one. This is the big one."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've talked, I mean, you mentioned a few times that being an outsider is such a central part of Elphaba's character, and there are moments where the movie gets very quiet and really focused on that, and it's almost painful to see how she realizes that she's apart from her peers, and just like I feel like you played that part very very quietly and very very deeply personally. How much were you actively thinking about this character as an outsider? She's both pushing people away and also desperately wanting to fit in, because it just feels like it seeps out of every scene of the movie.
I think it was on the surface for me, like very, very easy to access, very close to the bone for me. So I think it was always in my mind.
Mhm.
I think I've always seen her as an outsider, and think I've always thought of myself as an outsider. So that was, I say easy to access, but not easy to experience. So when we all of those scenes have it on there's like an energy about her that is always sort of carrying that, even in those moments where she gets to the joke before everybody else does. It's a defense mechanism, so if she gets there before everyone else does, then she can avoid what it feels like if someone gets there before her. One of those scenes for me, when she's in class and uh and Glinda says, "Oh, it seems the artichoke is steamed." I I I always, whenever I was in that, and when I watch it back, it always feels deeply uncomfortable because it's just that one moment where it's like, "Oh, I didn't get there fast enough," you know. And I feel like that's what I was thinking in that moment. "Ah, she got there quicker than I did. I missed that one. That one, as I caught a stray at that point. You know what I mean?" Um, and then it, you know, sort of all falls apart because she allows herself to hope, allows herself to believe that she might be included during the Ozdust, And when it isn't that, I think it's the first time that she allows everyone to see how hurt she is. You
Yeah,
know,
that's a painful scene, and you've said it was painful to
very
film.
painful to film. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a long, um, uh, hard, painful day because those are all real feelings that I've had and felt, and I always allowed that moment to not just be what happens at school, but for what happens in her life with her father and her sister. And I just thought all of those things coming together. And as someone who understands what the strange relationship with father can be like, I just think I think I allowed all of those things to be there and be present to be able to tell the story. Yeah.
Because Elphaba, much like in A Different Way, Dorothy keeps convincing herself, if I just see the wizard,
Yeah.
if I get there, if it's just one thing, all these things could be different. Is that a feeling you can relate to?
I think so. I think there's always like if if this is different or maybe it's that if that's different. I think I've come to terms with who I am now, but I think it took time. It always takes time to be yourself. And I'm lucky enough to have gotten to the point, but I know that there are some people who are still figuring out how to do that and how to get to that point. And so I understand what it's like to be like, well, maybe if I meet this person, they might change something for me, and that might help. But
And it's never actually that
no,
simple.
it never is. And often when you are faced with whatever you think might fix it, it always ends up being you who has to do it in the end. So yeah.
We're talking about that pivotal scene in the middle of the movie where they're all at a dance and Elphaba is ostracized. And yet that's also this turning point where her relationship with Glinda starts to become a real relationship.
Is right.
And you've said this, and I know other people who have been in Wicked, Kristen Chenoweth has said something similar, that this is a love story. It's a love story of two friends. Can you tell us more about how you thought about that?
Yeah, I think that the two of them have to find each other. They come meet each other probably at their worst and have to find a way to see each other. And that moment, I think, is an offering from Elphaba to Glinda to one, see her, and two, just show up as herself and not be worried about everybody else around them. And there's an offering of forgiveness and there's an offering to change. And when that offering is accepted, I think it's the first moment that the two of them find a real friend.
Yeah.
And they sort of accept the offering of growing out of the thing that they've been in and going into actual friendship and acceptance. And I think that's because of that really honest moment. I think that's the first time that the two of them are deeply, deeply honest with each other, even without saying anything. I think it allows them to grow and become really good friends. Yeah.
And I think one of the headlines of the press tour you're doing right now is just the way you and Ariana Grande have talked about the way that the two of you developed a real
That's
close,
right.
lasting relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we both decided that we would be good to each other. We would take care of each other. We would make the space that we needed to do this story and for us to feel safe within it. And I think I think it really allowed us to expand into this story. The more we felt safe, the easier it was to tell the story because we could bounce anything off each other. And if things were going on outside, we could really like come to each other and bring it to the table and use it that day. There was no judgment, just space and an honest place to bring whatever you had that day. If I didn't have energy that day, then I could say, hey, today's a tired day. Or if she didn't have energy, today's like a rough, tired day. Okay, great. What do we need to do to make that, work? How can I help? How can she help? And it meant that we were always providing the thing that we needed in order to continue doing this piece, telling the story as well as we possibly could.
I know we're talking about part one today, but given all of that, given everything you've said, I'm really wondering what it was like to film that big climactic song about that friendship for good. That must have been a lot.
Oh, yeah, that was a lot. I think I don't. John Chu, our director, said that at one point I don't want to give too much away, but there's a point in the song when we filmed it where we can't see each other, but both of us are just broken. He could see us, but we couldn't see each other. But the two of us have damn near the same reaction by the end of it, and that was a big one to film. That was a tough, very emotional, long hard moment to film. Yeah.
When you think about the themes of Wicked, there is a very powerful us versus them current running through the movie. Have you given thought to how relevant that is in this particular moment in time?
Yeah, and it keeps coming up about how relevant it is right now, but I don't think that ever changes. I think that it stays relevant. I think we keep being reminded of it. I think it's a thing that will keep being a usable source as the future goes on. And I mean, hopefully we can change it, but it's always a good reminder to say, hey, we can change things if we want to. These things are we're still in discussion about this. We're still shunning certain people. We're still not making space for people, but there is room to change. There is room for empathy. There is room for growth, or, it's a natural default. We keep coming back to this place. So I do think it's always going to be relevant. I think it was relevant, when The Wizard of Oz came out, and I think it's relevant right now. Yeah. But hopefully we'll start shifting towards empathy and understanding.
There's another side of that, and there's one particular scene where you see something happens, somebody exerts power in a way that everyone in the room knows is wrong.
Yes.
But everybody stops making eye contact except for your character. And everyone just says, I know this is wrong, but I don't feel like doing anything. It's not my place to deal with. And that's also often a natural
response. Yeah.
This is a movie that, as a musical, as you well know, so many people have connected with so deeply because so many people have felt in one way or another like an outsider. And I'm wondering what you would say to somebody who feels that way, who sees this movie and connects that way at this moment where it seems like inhabiting this role, your career is just exploding all around the world in this really amazing way right now. Like, what would you say to somebody who's listened to that soundtrack 7,000 times because they feel like an outsider?
I would say that thing that makes you feel like an outsider is that thing that also makes you special. I'm one of the rebels. I'm definitely not like your cookie cutter, normal, everyday being. I'm very different, and I know that. And it takes time to be okay with that. But the moment you are, it's very freeing. And it might be hard right now, but stick with it. There's something about you. You're different, and that's okay. And it might be the thing that gets you exactly where you need to be and where you want to be. It might be the thing that helps you make your dreams come true. Because I don't think if I didn't understand what it is like to feel different, what it's like to feel like you're on the outside, that this would have come to my way. And I don't think I would have had as deep an understanding of it as I have if I didn't understand what it felt like to be different, to be a bit of an outsider. And this is a massive moment, and my dreams are coming true. But I think it definitely has something to do with how different I feel and have been, And be brave. You'll be okay.
Well, Cynthia Erivo, star of Wicked, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.